Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Nicolas Flowers, who is an author and an illustrator. And in this conversation, we talk about his biography, his journey growing up in Japan to a white father and a Japanese mother, and then traveling to America and dealing with what some call homophobia or dislike of homosexuality from males specifically, and how he dealt with that with a trans identity and then grew out of the trans identity and through art and self-reflection and spiritual practices has accepted himself for who he is. He is the illustrator of Pamela Garfield Yeager's book, Froggy Girl, which was featured in my talk with her. You can find links to his work down there in the description, as well as links to support this channel. Without further ado, here is Nicolas Flowers.
Yeah, why don't I see myself? There we go.
Hey,
Hello.
how are you?
I feel good. How are you?
Really sorry about that. It was the holiday and I didn't check my calendar.
It's all good.
Oh,
I thought you were
sorry to
making
keep
yourself
you.
look pretty.
I did that as soon as I realized, which just to trying to fit my hair into a hat and putting on a shirt. That's about the extent of my beauty
Simple,
technique.
simple. Nice. Yeah,
Are
mine's
you?
simple too.
Yeah.
I shaved my head like a month ago because I was like, I'm done with my hair. And
Okay.
so in the morning, I just wet it a little bit and just use a towel to dry it and then brush my teeth and here I am.
Good to go.
Simple dimple. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. But you got a festive shirt on for today. Looks funny.
Yeah, it's summer.
Funky.
You know,
Yeah.
you got your wife
Yeah,
beater on. I'm kidding.
I do.
Sorry.
But it's a women's shirt, so I wonder how that works out.
Hmm. Well, we don't have to get into domestic violence rates this early
No,
in the conversation. Yeah.
not today.
No.
Okay.
So you work with Pam. How did she find you? You guys, I guess you went to some sort of, I believe she said the APP or AAP.
AP. Yeah. Well, that was an interesting one. I am a person that is definitely led by my heart and my soul. So when I get a nudge or an impression to do something, I just go ahead and do it. So I was on Instagram. I had been following Pam for quite a few years, just watching her content and things like that. And I had written a graphic novel, which is right there. And I was like, oh, I wonder if she'd want to promote it or, have me have her on her, platform or something like that to promote me and talk about the book. So it's like, it'd be cool to have it, be seen in the world. And she was like, well, I don't really have a platform to have people to speak, but I'd be willing to, put your stuff on my story. So I was like, cool. And I had that inclination a month before. She reached out to me being like, hey, my illustrator for my children's book, um,
Flaked out.
decided not to do the
Yeah.
book anymore. Would you want to be the illustrator? So I was like, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. And prior to this, I had written with my mentor, her name is Kim. She and I had written these two children's book right there about raising resilient kids because we were like, the all these trans books are so of disservice to our current generation and not really teaching kids how to process their feelings. That's this whole trans movement is kids do not know how to deal with their internal world. And so they completely get lost in identifying with their feelings. So they identify with their pain. And
Mm.
to me, trans identity is a pain identity. And so that's how these children's book came about is teaching kids how to process their feelings, how to create forgiveness, how to love and accept your traits as they are, as the divine has given to you.
Mm.
And since I went to school doing art and illustration for 4 years, it just felt right to do Pam's children's book because she already had written this story about a girl that wants to be a frog, but then realizes she's awesome as she is, as God has given her these awesome, beautiful traits and qualities as a person. And so it was so easy to come up with illustrations because my brain works in visual language more than words. I'm more of a visual person. And so I think about she was so easy to work with. She was like, do whatever you want, essentially. And I created like probably 15 to 20 sketches. And I was like, Pam, what do you think of this? And she was like, go ahead, just start coloring. I was like, okay, I'll just go. And I just was sitting with my iPad for a good month or so, I think maybe 2 months. Originally, she wanted it to be done this spring. And I was just planning it out, doing illustration per week to do it. But at some point, she was like, actually, I need this now because you get it done by the end of the month. And this was probably November or December last year. And I was like, okay, well, I have to like tell my boss at the cafe I'm working at, just be like, can I take a week or two off so I can just crank this
Grind
project
it.
out?
Yeah.
And so it was super easy once I started to just jump right in. It's almost like I create this world when I'm illustrating. I'm part of this world. I'm staring at my screen for probably about 12 hours a day just because, the illustrations are detailed and they're colorful. And so I put a lot of love into the creations. And during the time, I'm just like so immersed in it. The 12 hours just flies by to me. When the time flies like that, I just know this is what I meant to do. When the energy
Mm.
just comes, I just go with it. And
Yeah.
so it was just so much fun to create a story that I can relate to and then create this awesome whimsical world with it. That makes
Mhm.
sense.
No, absolutely. It's really pretty. I
Have you
Pam
had have you
reads
seen
the
it
book.
before?
Yeah, Pam reads the book at the end of our interview, which we just did a few days ago,
Oh,
and
cool.
the in post the images will be on there. They're really bright, colorful, chunky, like really engaging, really immersive. Very, very immersive.
Because I see a lot of these illustrations in children's books that have, I would call lackluster and not engaging, in my opinion. And I've seen some stuff that have been done by conservatives, and I'm just like, that doesn't. If I was a kid, I wouldn't read that, just because I love colorful and unique styles. And
Hmm.
so coming up with this and doing my visual research was so much fun. And, sending Pam a bunch of different color palettes, being like, what is this one? How does this one work? How does this one work? And because
Hmm.
I'm such a feeler. And if it doesn't feel right, I can tune into that and make my adjustments and go
Hmm.
from there. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's been a fun journey.
You mentioned being a kid. What were you like as a kid?
I think I was a kid at some point. I'd argue I'm still like a kid. Um, my childhood was definitely interesting, but as a kid, I was very whimsical, playful, feminine, flamboyant, and very dramatic and expressive, that's for sure. And as time went on, actually, I should say as school started, probably like kindergarten, then I started to dim my light just because kids were like, oh, you're different,
Mm.
we're gonna single you out so that we can have like a scapegoat and make you wrong. And so that's kind of how, for me, the birth of the trans identity started was from like an original wound, right? From the
Mm.
wound of there's something wrong with me. Because I am a person that loves personality types, and I'm a one on the Enneagram, which means my biggest fear is being seen as corrupt. And so obviously this fear was leading my life in the driver's seat of my life, controlling all my decisions.
Yeah.
And so um, the playful side, the playful, beautiful, fun side of me disappeared. My dad had even mentioned that after the fact I detransitioned, he's like, "Oh my gosh, my Nicholas is back."
Mm.
The playful, fun, joyful Nicholas, but from age 6 or 7 all the way up until 21 or 22, that was gone. That had been suppressed and shoved into a closet, never to be open until I detransitioned. So
Hmm.
It was definitely a journey to get there.
When did the concept of gender or transgender come across your radar?
Well, that's a good question. I started to notice and watch a lot of this content when I moved to America. I grew up in Japan from age 6 to 13. And with being wanting to assimilate into the American culture, when I moved here, I was probably in junior high school, starting seventh grade. And seventh and eighth grade was just such a weird period. And freshman or sophomore year was really the time I started to dive into this ideology. Because we were given iPads in high school. We had access to the internet in a way that wasn't censored. So I was engaging with this content, watching, BuzzFeed videos or people talking about 10 signs you might be trans or 10 signs you're non-binary, and really getting obsessed with this identity because what was capturing this thought was the fact that, oh my gosh, this could be the answer to why there's something wrong with me.
Hmm.
That's always was, how can I get myself out of people perceiving there's something wrong with me? And seeing all these people on the internet being like, I can be my true self. I am loved and accepted. That was obviously the draw to wanting to be part of the ideology. And so this hyperfixation of being on the internet and having something that feels good was addictive. And plus, it was a way to escape because I did not like my life. I didn't like the people that I was around. I did not like my family. I did not like my life at all. So clearly, this was a way to escape out of my reality to then create a reality in my own internal world where maybe I was safe, but actually was doing a lot more harm to my psyche than
Wow.
um, I knew at the time.
So when you began talking about being a kid and going to school and being an outsider, I just assumed you were in an American school and that being an effeminate, dramatic young boy would be like the baseline of being an outsider. But being in Japan, are you both your parents Japanese or you half?
What do you think?
I'm gonna say half.
There you go. Yeah,
Okay, so Japan school, it's a very strong monoculture. It's very
strong.
homogenous. And so not only are you effeminate, so I don't even know to what degree Japanese culture considers the effeminate man an outsider, but there's
I
probably
hate it.
okay, well there we go. So you got double outsiderness
Yeah, it was
going on.
definitely difficult. The race thing wasn't necessarily an issue. I mean, obviously, I physically looked different from all the kids in the school, right? But I should clarify, I was born in California, but was only in America until like six or so. And then we moved to Japan because my parents were like, oh, it'd be fun for you to grow up with the family. We were only supposed to be in Japan for about a year, but my mom was like, no, let's stay another year, and another year until it became to the point where I graduated sixth grade. But immediately the kids completely saw the differences. All the kids in the classroom are obviously Japanese. And
How good was
I,
your Japanese when you moved there? Were you
well,
bilingual at
my
that point
mom
as
was
well?
always speaking Japanese to my sister and I. And so Japanese, I think, was our main language. English was a little bit more, not harder, but secondary, I would say.
Okay.
And so I knew how to speak Japanese. My family and I would go back to Japan visiting every other year or so while we were little kids. My sister and I were little kids. But eventually English got more diminished over time. My dad was trying to engage us in English by teaching us English maybe once or twice a week. But my
Mhm.
dad loses patience really fast at that time. He's evolved now,
Yeah.
but at the time he'd be so frustrated. I remember my sister and my dad were sitting down, and my sister had a hard time saying the word ball, and he would cover the letter. the ALL for ball, and he was like, pronounce this first letter and then the second part of the word. And then she would be like, B, all. But then when my dad like lifted his hands, she was like, bail. She just could not pronounce it. So that was
Hmm.
sort of our education with English and our limitation with connecting with our dad. And I'm sure it was hard for him to connect with all the family members because my family over there there's about 40 of us, including like cousins and aunts and uncles and my grandparents and my family and I. And so it's a big family. But for the most part, I was, singled out. Even my family. They'd call me Okama, which means, the FAGGOT
Hmm.
in Japanese. And, they do it in like a funny, teasy way. But obviously, when you're a kid and you're just being said that every single day by kids at school, you're going to just be like, wow, I
Hmm.
am not loved here. Wow, I'm not treated fairly here. And so my cousins would say that. My sister would once in a while say it. My dad would throw out gay jokes. So being a homosexual was obviously just not going to be accepted. I mean, I would sit down with my grandpa, we'd watch Japanese TV, and there'd be drag queens or men dressed up in female clothes, and or even honestly trans identified people as well. And he'd be like, oh, look at that man, and just really like ridiculing that. And it was like, okay,
Hmm.
I guess that's wrong too. And there was not necessarily any representation of homosexuality there as well. So when I had these stirrings of feelings of attractions to boys, probably I can remember as young as 7 or 10 or something like that, very early on, and just not knowing what to do with it and making it wrong and being like, oh, I should not have these feelings. And once puberty started around 12 for me, that was when things got worse. I would say the internalized homophobia really took on because my family members, people at school, the kids were all making me wrong. They were like, "Oh, there's something wrong with you for just being you." So I eventually, the wounds within me created this belief system that there's something wrong with me. I'm unlovable. I'm an abomination. I'm corrupt. And those were my daily thoughts I was having.
Hmm.
And eventually, as puberty started, those thoughts took over, and my escapism kind of turned into pornography.
Really?
hmm And I love astrology, and it's connected with astrology because my moon's in Scorpio, which means Scorpio has this energy of like deep, intense sexual energy. And for me, that was a way for me to escape into the taboo of whatever everything was wrong, I could experience it with pleasure.
Hmm.
And it started off with watching these men with beer bellies on YouTube and slapping their stomachs and really being attracted to that. And I don't know what that was about, but it was interesting, and that developed into um, wanting to look up on the internet like naked pictures of men. What does that look like? And getting excited about that and aroused. And I think there is some natural curiosity to as kids that I was listening to and inclining to just jump into, but then the internet's not really a healthy, safe place for kids. And so
Hmm.
started to see, oh my God, men kissing. And then they're taking their clothes off and they're doing stuff to each other, private parts. What is this? And then my body started to, start shaking and getting aroused, and intense feelings were showing up of pleasure. And I was kind of copying what they were doing on the screen with my bodies. And I was like, whoa, this is so much fun. And that's sort of how the addiction started to happen from age 12 up until 20, like a good
Jeez.
almost
Wow.
decade of porn addiction. And no one really knew about it.
Really?
Yeah. But now I'm not, now I don't watch porn at all. I just think it's such an abomination to my psyche and I don't want that in
Hmm.
my aura.
Yeah.
And so I just say no to that. And now I even can help people, create an because I to me I find like the sexual energy to be this rhythm or like a pattern, like a mental physical pattern that is sort of like a circuitry. And every time you release, it creates this re-implements or creates a new pattern, like sort of like a neural pathway. And so if you can train your mind and your body to um, create new ways of accessing your sexual energy, then you can kind of like move out of this addiction. That's sort of how I
Mhm.
did it was self-control and no judgment for my experiences. And then just creating new ways of connecting with my sexual energy, if that makes sense.
So in the typology, which is contested, but I think it's pretty darn accurate of trans people, there's basically in the male sector, there's autogynephile and then the
Right.
homosexual transsexual. Um, how did the trans identity latch onto your sexuality or
Well, it
whatnot?
started with fantasy because obviously I was so porn addicted that, I mean, when I was watching porn immediately after I released, there was shame.
Hmm.
Being like, oh, I should not be watching this. I should be watching straight porn instead. That was my logic at the time. I
Oh,
should be watching
oh,
straight porn instead. And
huh.
the fantasies started to develop into wanting a vagina, a female vagina, because this
As opposed
need
to
a penis.
male male
Because I didn't
vagina?
want to be seen as a man. I didn't want to fall in love with a man.
Yeah,
To my mental
trans the gay
template
away.
at the yeah, transing the gay way, because my mental template said being a homosexual is wrong. So how can I escape that? Well, the trans ideology has this solution of be a woman and get yourself a neo vagina and you'll be able to get your man. That was a big chunk of why medically transition is this capture, wanting to be loved by a man, a straight
Hmm.
man. That was
Yeah.
definitely the appeal of transition. And I mean, I was attracted to all these straight boys at school, and plus the intense dance with porn, it really heightened that sensation of seeking straight men. And so
Hmm.
I'm like walking down the halls in high school, just watching and looking at these guys while fantasizing about being penetrated by them in this vagina I was creating in my fantasy.
Wow, that's so
So,
intense.
yeah, that's clearly not, and that was happening probably all day long during the 4 years
Yeah.
of high school. And that's just not someone that has a healthy mindset, if that's
Mm.
all you're thinking about.
Yeah. So typically when males and females, but we'll just talk about males right now, when males reach puberty, we're given this sexual energy, but it's also kind of paired with a gift, a creative gift or a sport gift or something to give to the world rather than something to take from the world sexually. What was your I know the porn took up a lot of your creative juices, but what was your talents? Was it studying? Is this when art started taking off, or how did you start to participate or find gifts in yourself to give to others?
That's a good question. No one has ever asked me that before. I have been a swimmer all my life. I was
Hmm.
dedicated to becoming like a really, really good. I was a varsity swimmer in high school, starting freshman year. And so I've been swimming since the age of 7 and competing since I was 12 or 13. And so a lot of my time was dedicated to sports. I was probably doing swimming 2 hours every day, Monday
Wow.
through Saturday. And so there was a lot of years of swimming. And I think that was a great way to like not distract, but take away from all the trans ideology because I think I quit swimming after sophomore year because the bullying was just getting too much for me. With being in the locker room and the boys taunting me and just saying awful things, just coming to my face and saying, go kill yourself. That's just not a fun environment to be. As much as I love swimming,
Mm,
it just didn't work out. So when I quit the sport, that's when things hit the fan. The other talent I had was, I mean, it's kind of obvious here, doing art. I loved creating art. I mean, that was sort of my way of another escape was doing art and creating, painting, drawing, using charcoal. All these different mediums allowed me to access a world that I didn't even know I was creating. It was just so fun to sort of lose track of time and be so invested in something that really meant a lot to me. And so high school had this awesome outlet of having projects and projects and projects. I remember senior year, I loved doing AP Studio, which was 12 pieces of concentration. I remember doing watercolor pieces, you spending 30 hours or so on each piece and just, you know, really enjoying being so immersed in something that my pain, my wounds, none of that was
Hmm.
present. It was just me, the board, and the colors. And that was just so much fun to spend all my time with.
Was that a way where you found acceptance and praise from real people, attention?
Somewhat. I mean, I had teachers say they loved what I was doing, but then there would be times where teachers would be like, this isn't like they would show up my piece and be like, this is an example of what not to do. And those were the days where the whole day was just destroyed because of the pain of the teacher being like, oh my gosh, he didn't like my piece. But
What
otherwise,
could you give an example of what not to do? Were
it
you
was
cartooning
watercolor.
or
It was just, for
garish
example,
or
doing a gradient, let's say, of like black to just really, really white, like that gradient. And I guess the way I was doing it just was not right. And the
so it was
teacher
more
just
of a
showed
technical rather
a
than aesthetic.
technical.
Okay.
Yeah, because my pieces are very, I mean, the art I do now is very, it can go from like very illustrative to very abstract, and there isn't really an in between. And so I'm sure for me, there's certain things where I love order, but when it comes to art, I hate it. Just don't tell me what to do, you know? So when teachers are like, "Oh, you don't want to do it this way," it's like, who died and made you king, you know?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But yeah, art was definitely something I just, I mean, if the world didn't have any art, I think I wouldn't find it worth living.
The KYS would have come true. Not
I
to
mean, I
beat
remember
around the
at
bush.
7 years old, I was threatening my parents. We were on this second floor of our apartment. I was just on the opposite side of the terrace, and I was like, "Mom, I'm gonna kill myself."
Oh,
I was
okay.
threatening to do that. I mean, I think I was part of it was joking because I wanted attention,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
at the same time, I was like, "I will do it, Mom. I'll do it." And she was like, "Just stop."
There's this concept of the gay community, the trans community, the all the identity groups. Where did you find connection and community IRL? Or was it only relegated to forums, chat groups, etc.?
Well, what's interesting is I don't think I had much of a connection or like the queer friends online. It was more the friends I had. Because all my friends were always like lesbian women or gay
Hmm.
women. And I also was very selectively mute. I was
Hmm.
quiet. I was definitely um to myself, I was very, very introverted in the traditional sense of like, I don't want to be around people unless I really, really like them. And I had this friend named Anya, and we'd be just sending each other like gay memes and always talking about like, oh my God, that's gay. Or we would even go to the mall like shoplifting, just like it's normal. And she was kind of like my only friend at the time during high
Hmm.
school years just because I just did not like to be around people. I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to be seen. And that was sort of my extent of LGBTQIA plus friends. I tried going to GSA, but the moment we started doing pronouns, I was like, there's a language barrier here. I don't understand what's going on.
Hmm.
Like we would go around the room and just say our pronouns, and I had to go whisper into my friend's ear. It's like, what is a pronoun? Like, I was
Oh,
just so
yeah.
confused.
So the
And
ESL aspect of what was it? Non-inclusion, or because the whole progressive stack is really built around servicing the marginalized, and you were marginalized by this pronoun move that was meant to demarginalize people, but because of the language barrier.
exactly. I mean, the Japanese language doesn't really have a pronoun system. And
Okay.
so that was another confusing thing for me. And I mean, it's not like um I was poor with English. It was more like that's not a common word I use to describe my day-to-day life. So I don't really
Yeah.
had a necessity for it. And
Wow.
so when that came up, it was like such a weird thing for me to go around the room. And I'm like, I visually see you're a man. Why are you saying you're he, him? It was like, that was like, what? Even though
Yeah.
I was watching all this gender stuff during freshman year in high school, it was still not connecting, if that makes sense.
Wow, so much cognitive dissonance. What ethnicity is your father? Your mom's Japanese.
My mom swapped. Wow, look at you. You're very intuitive. Yeah,
Well,
my mom, what did I say that? I don't know.
I picked
Um,
it up. You didn't say it directly, but
my dad's Caucasian.
okay. Like German, Irish.
Uh,
Just wondering.
Irish, Swedish, and English.
Okay, so kind of an
Yeah.
American mutt then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
Okay. I just
My
wonder because there's an aspect of your personality, and I know ethnicity it's not a cultural construct, but it's a very hazy kind of influence, kind of like kind of astrology. You have these influences, and there's an ethnic influence, and when you're describing your introversion and just kind of the way that you formulate your social milieu, it seems there's something kind of Japanese
Oh
about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's very Japanese. I mean, the way the Japanese culture is so set up is you're below everyone in a way. Like you want to make whoever you're talking to higher than you.
Mm.
That's even in the language. There's like three different types of ways you speak in Japanese. Like there's just the regular day-to-day slang, and there's something higher, and then there's another thing that's higher, and there's this hierarchy. And so
Yeah.
when you're feminine and you're always surrounded by all the women, which I didn't want to be a man because I was constantly being made wrong by all the men in my life, that I was like, well, look, I just was kind of reflecting back the behaviors of the females, which the females in the Japanese culture is being subservient and always being like the service oriented. I mean, the men in the culture don't do any of the work. If I'm gathering with my family, the women are doing the dishes, they're cooking, they're doing all of it. And if I try to help, they're like, no, go sit down. You're a man. And so
But then when you'd
um,
go sit down with the men, they would reject you too.
it would just be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I went back to Japan this year in February. I hadn't seen my family in 7 years, and they didn't see me during my medical transition. But they did see photos, but they were like, we don't know how to approach this, which is fine. I'm glad they didn't know how to approach it. But I sat down with them and I was telling my uncles, I do talks on panels talking about the medical harm that's being done on kids and adults and things like that. And they were like clapping. They were just so amazed that I'm doing this because
Mm.
they're clearly seeing in their culture there's somewhat of a rise of trans identified men and women. And they're seeing that and they're like, we don't know how to do this. We think it's wrong, but we don't know how to speak out about it because the Japanese are very respectful. They're all about, we don't want to offend anybody. And they're always closed off about their emotions as well. So it's hard to, I would say Japan would have a hard time having revolution because of all those customs, all
Hmm.
those um, social norms that are in place where it restricts them from doing those things.
Hmm. It's very hierarchical.
Very, very, very.
One wonders how a trans woman would go through a gender transition in a culture that has such strict gender norms, like all of a sudden being expected to, or trying to violate not just a physical or a language barrier, but also the customs of like now I'm a woman, so you do the woman things and
Right.
you're treated like the woman. And then do men speak to women and women speak to men in a unique way? Is there like that?
No, there
Okay.
isn't that sex difference, but it's more of like if you're, let's say you're going to an office and the customers are always being treated like they're like the best thing in the world. Like they're
Yeah,
the
they're the
most,
royalty.
the royalty, there we go. And whoever is serving them has to speak in a language that, for me, I don't know how to speak it because it's so difficult. And so,
Oh, the really the high form of
uh-huh.
language. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah,
Is
it's
it difficult because it's ornate or because there's just so many different unique tenses and stuff?
well, it's tenses and the words are different and it's almost like a completely
Wow.
different language.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so you
High
have to really
Japanese. Yeah.
be in that atmosphere to like really train and teach yourself. Like they'll put a specific letter in front of a word just to make it sound more pretty, not pretty, but more formal.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's not something that I want to be part of all the time. And I think I'm glad that my parents decided to move when I was almost turning 13 because it's so monocultured. It's so doesn't really like the individual. It likes the group think, right?
Hmm.
It's all
Hmm.
about tribe mentality. And so
Yeah.
I love being in America because now I get to really honor being an individual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the art scene or the influences, or I mean, a smattering of Japanese art history because they're very creative culture, very oriented towards the high aesthetic values. It's just, Americans are more individualistic, as you said, and the Japanese, because they produce so much content that has a rather strong influence on popular culture with manga and anime and, the what's his name? The Twitter erupted a few months ago, making every meme in the style of, Spirited Away.
Oh,
Miyazaki, is it?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
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 Do you
Oh my
do
gosh,
you
yeah.
have do you draw just on your aesthetic level? Do you draw from do you see the Japanese influence or do you see some influence from that culture, that mindset in how you approach expression, animation, visual arts?
Mm, probably. I'm sure I do. I don't think it's conscious, but it definitely does show up just because when I came to America, I just didn't like the aesthetics in terms of why are the pencils only yellow? That's stupid. I grew up with pencils that had all these anime characters on them, and that was my pencil box. The pencil boxes were ugly in America. I was like, why are there no cute little characters? The
Hmm.
erasers are horrible. The whole stationery was just such a disservice. It's like when I went to, like a Target or something, it's like this must be a joke. This must be a joke. They must be hiding all the good stuff somewhere because I could
Mm.
not find any of like the cute stuff that I wanted to put into my, pencil box and to bring to school with me. It just was such a disappointment. So I guess in that sense, the aesthetics there was something that I was always gravitated towards. I just love the cute, colorful stuff that the Japanese culture, really invests time and their energy into.
Do
But I mean,
male Japanese men, are they allowed to express cutesy things and collect cutesy things? Is a little bit more, is that like a less of a, you know, a
I think
homophobic signifier, a
I think
homosexual
now it
signifier?
is. I think
Yeah.
when I was a kid, it was still made fun of. I mean, it's more like the boys when I was growing up, they were more interested in like the Dragon Ball Z
Yeah.
and One Piece, that sort of anime. And so they'd have stuff like that, their pencil cases and stuff would be like that. But I mean, so in Japan, we have these specific backpacks called randoseru that we'd have to wear. And boys would always have just their traditional black color.
Okay. Yeah.
I wore a turquoise one, like this bright turquoise one. And so I was the only one in the whole entire school that had this colorful one where all the boys was just wearing black. And
Yeah.
so that was also sort of a unique standpoint. I think I always stood out wherever I go, wherever I went. And so when I medically transitioned and I was going to art school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I fit in as a trans person. It just felt so weird. It's like I'm not unique anymore. I don't stand out anymore. It felt so weird to just fit in because my school did a survey and apparently more than, I think about 50% identified as non-binary
Yeah.
or trans. And it was like,
Etc. Yeah.
this is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Hmm.
that was just a weird phenomena of always being seen as different, but then fitting in.
Yeah. Was that relaxing to fit in, or did you feel a particular loss of some cachet from?
I think both. I think part of it, well, I don't think I ever believed I did a good job passing, even though everybody was like, "Oh my God, you look like you're more." I hate this statement, but you look more of a woman than your sister does. And I was like, I don't know, guys. I don't think that I believe what you're saying, but sure, whatever.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it just felt really awkward to fit in because people would just be like, she, and just like, wait, what? You see me as a she? That's what I wanted, but it still felt
Yeah.
weird because I was being seen as a heterosexual woman. And it was just such a weird
Were
experience
you seen that
having
way
that.
by the other rainbow people, or by the straight men whose attention you had pined for? Did men start to see you the way you
Both.
wanted to be seen?
I think both, but people didn't really ever approach me and still don't approach me in terms of courting me, which is interesting. I did have a few instances where I didn't tell the guy I was on a date with that I was trans, and I put myself in sticky situations where we were kissing and touching each other, and they're like, "What is this thing on your
Uh-oh.
genitals?" And I told him the truth, and he was like pointing his finger to the door. I'm glad I didn't get killed or anything like that, but not smart
Mm.
situations. But that was the desperation of wanting to be loved and accepted as a
Yeah.
woman because I didn't want to be gay. I wanted the boys that or the men that would love me no matter what, but I had to do stupid, silly things in order to do it, and it wasn't really real. There was a bunch of men because during 20 to 21, that was my very, or maybe I should say 19 to 21, were my promiscuous years, where I was
Of
just
your age or of
constantly.
the century? Or were you
I don't know
born
if you're
on
joking or not.
Y2K?
No, no, no. I meant that age 20 to 21, like
Okay.
19, 21,
I bet
that
the
I was being
years
very promiscuous.
basically line up though, right?
Yeah, in a way.
You're what,
Well, they do
20?
because I'm in 2000 baby.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
1921, you could be okay, there we go. See.
But it was it was an interesting time, sleeping with all these men from Grinder because they were all from Grinder, and they would, I guess, they would see me as a woman, like they weren't, calling me a man. They were like, okay, she. Well, they obviously knew I was a trans woman, but or trans identified man, and so what's interesting is they would call my parts like vagina or stuff like that. And it just was like, in a way, at that time, it was nice because I was like, okay, I'm being affirmed, I'm being accepted in a way. But ultimately, they didn't last. Kind of like feelings, they don't last. Um, it was like I'd have one night stands and then they'd ghost me. One night stands and they'd ghost me. They didn't, all they wanted to do was have sex with me because it was more erotic and exciting and sort of their gateway of I'm dancing with the man, but they're still a kind of a woman. So I get to have this fun experience. And I think that's what I see with men on Grindr is a lot of them are bisexual or they're just, denying their sexuality or they want to get their 30s, their 20s and 30s. During that age range, they just want to get their sexual energy out until they like are ready to settle with a woman. That's sort of what I kind of have seen is they sort of use vulnerable, well, I wouldn't say vulnerable, but maybe like wounded gay men that want to be loved and accepted, and sort of these men like me get have gotten trapped into instances where, oh my God, maybe he loves me, and it's just like a one night stand and it kind of ends there. And for me, it falls flat because I'm very feminine. I'm very emotionally need to connect with someone in order to have sex. So every time I had sex with a man when I was trans identified, um I felt very hollow afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
male sexuality, especially gay male sexuality or promiscuous male sexuality, is incredibly transactional. Hence, pornography and prostitution. It's just a transaction.
it is.
Yeah. There's a spiritual aspect. Well, by spiritual, I mean there's a archetypal or developmental aspect for those of us humans who, by dint of circumstance, ethnicity, sexuality, and so on, are the outsider. It's a necessary function to our societies, and it's aeons old. And even the progressive desire to erase the outsider or bring the margins in ends up making normies marginalized. Ends up trying to reconfigure this thing. But we always have a special place for that outsider, and it could be positive, but it generally becomes scapegoating or alienating. You as somebody who's different, everybody puts all of the community tends to put all of their stress, all their internal conflict on you, and then kind of shove you out together. And then they get to resolve the tensions between themselves. And so I'm wondering, despite your attempts to become normal or to achieve acceptance, if you've seen the positive aspects of personal growth or development in being an outsider, if that has come to be something that you've been able to accept and then see as a positive role that like a kind of a service that you have, and not just being an accepting the negativity from people, but being someone from a different perspective.
I find that to be one of my greatest gifts. I feel like I'm meant to be sort of a disruptor and change maker in not just my family, but you know, my culture that I grew up in.
Mm,
Wherever I go, I just stand out, and so people are gonna always judge. I remember when I was during the election year last year, Laura and I would just go down University Drive in Tempe, and I just was wearing my MAGA hat, wearing like this green sweater. I obviously look like a fag, and clearly people were just laughing and pointing fingers at me. And I just owned it because I believed in what I believe in. I believe in the truth. I believe in speaking the truth. And so for me, being different the way I am, and I don't mean it in like the queer way, I just mean it in the way of like I show up as me and I don't care what people think. That's sort of the gift I have. And I meant to turn heads. I wore my MAGA hat onto a plane going to Chicago and people were just like, like, why is this gay Asian man wearing a MAGA hat? That just seems like such a contradictory thing that this person's doing, that they're obviously like hurting themselves. They obviously hate themselves. And it's like, no, I've done the work. I've done the work to love and accept myself. So if you are perceiving that, if you're saying that those things are stirring within you, or someone is having these activating feelings of, oh my gosh, or like having anger or sadness from my actions, I'm grateful for that because then I'm doing my job. To me, if I'm able to activate feelings in people, I'm doing my job because that is an opportunity for them to grow into and loving and accepting themselves, if that makes sense. Because
mm,
when these feelings arise, they're meant to be loved and addressed and seen. And it's an opportunity for people to do that. That's a moment for soul growth. We're are we're meant to be like diamonds. We're meant to grow into diamonds where all this pressure, this tension that we experience for example, feelings, painful feelings, uncomfortable feelings are here to transform us. And that was obviously my trans experience. I had to go through that painful experience and understand what belief systems and thoughts and feelings were controlling my actions and learning to love and accept the parts that felt like they need to find love and acceptance externally because they felt unlovable. My wounds felt unlovable. And so learning to love and accept that and not caring what the people outside world thinks of me, and then just being that energy of not caring what the people think, triggering that in people is a way for people to unlock their own transformation. So I find that to be a powerful gift that I have to, if I can trigger something in you from just walking, that's awesome.
Yeah. There's there's a toxic aspect to that, or where that goes too far, where it erodes norms, where it just makes everything into a goop, where everything should be
Okay.
loved and accepted on a cultural level, right? And that's what we see the fallout of with 60, 70 years of just continual progress, quote unquote. There's this, in the liberal project, the American liberal Western project of accepting the difference and decreasing the bigotry, decreasing the ways in which we've blocked ourselves off from connecting and seeing the other person as human beings. There's this aspect of it where if it goes too far, it just erodes all of the ability to say this is right and this is wrong. There's no so I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I watch it in my own work, my own process of understanding that everybody's a human being, and loving and cherishing them as God would, or as naively and openly as I can, but at the same time being aware that not every behavior is acceptable, not every person
Right. Well,
is just
so I'm curious
inherently
about what you're
correct.
saying is
So
like, I guess I'm wanting to know a specific example,
yeah,
right? Because I don't mean like I'm just, shaking off my shirt off and shaking, I don't
yeah,
know, like
right,
just being weird. I'm not saying that. I just mean like if I'm just walking down the street and just putting my earbuds and I'm walking and I smile at someone just the way I look,
yeah,
um, and if that scares someone or if that does anything to
yeah.
someone, I don't necessarily mean to be like, I'm doing awful things that are immoral to trigger people. I don't mean in that way. I just mean in a way that,
No,
you know,
I hear the morality, the positive morality in what you're saying, but also I think wherever pride was headed is kind of like decreasing. It started as, a day and then a weekend and then a week and then a month. And then it like, it just became like a season, the season that precedes the fall is it's all pride. And it's just in your face and anything goes. And it started with the intention of acceptance, achieving acceptance. Maybe there's other political aspects in there, but it started as a bid for homosexuals, both male and female, to no longer be the subject of hate and persecution, and to achieve some sort of acceptance. And that acceptance at some point turned to a demand for affirmation. It at some point that desire for acceptance became, 50% of college campus is non-binary or other in the sexuality, because it's interesting to wonder what constrains that, or what's the limiting principle on disrupting and dismantling and challenging people. And I think I can hear it in you. You're not like shaking your tatas on the, White House lawn, which is like peak pride. But you're just being yourself.
right. I mean, I think demanding becomes very, what's the word? Narcissistic, right? There can be a line where you cross that. Um, but for me, I have a heart of love and service, and I always follow
Mm,
that. And if I am not in alignment with that, then I know I'm not doing something that's loving. That's
mhm.
sort of how I follow it, is is what are my actions aligning with that? And if not, I'm not going to do that certain thing, you know? I don't want to, shake my tatas in front of the White House. That's very immoral to me. It's just very
Disrespectful?
disgraceful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
disgraceful.
So,
So, yeah, I hear the core of your Japanese culture, like
thank you.
coming through. So when so you were enmeshed in trans propaganda and you desired trans, we covered why you wanted transition or why you wanted to be a woman. But what was the process of medicalizing? How did you instantiate that?
Okay. Well, that was more of an easy part just because I was living in Illinois. And so access to those drugs were very easy once you turn 18. And so I had already been
Did you
contemplating.
did you speak with your parents about this or
Well, yeah, I had to take day off of school one day because they were Planned Parenthood was only open on I think the weekdays, and I just wanted to do it when I felt like doing it. And so I was sleeping in the basement of my parents' house at the time. And my dad comes downstairs and he knocks on my door telling me, "Good night, Nicholas." And mind you, our relationship at the time for a good, maybe about a decade, were about a sentence or one word exchange or no words at all for every single day, right? There was not a lot of connection there just because I shunned them out and I didn't really talk to them. And we were always having conflict because I um, was a very angry child. And so my dad came downstairs and I shocked him by saying, "Dad, I need to take tomorrow off from school because I'm going to Planned Parenthood to get hormones." And he was shocked in the moment, but he didn't share that. He didn't show it, which was nice. He was immediately like, "Can I come with you? Can I
Hmm.
come with you?"
Oh,
And so the next day, we drove to Planned Parenthood together. We sat in the appointment with their therapist, and I was telling this lady about how I'm feeling suicidal. I hate my body hair. I hate my voice. And these are all thoughts my dad has never ever heard from me. So it must have been such a sad thing to hear from your son, hearing all these things, and now all of a sudden he wants to become a woman. Like what? I mean, obviously he was sort of noticing that I was, painting my nails, and we would have arguments about or screaming fights about, I'm gender fluid. Why are you calling me he? Like that sort of thing.
hmm.
Um, and he would like scream at me, being like, "Oh, you have gender issues, you know?" It's like, yeah, I do. And so telling this therapist about I have suicidal ideation, and eventually she was like, "Oh my gosh, we got to put you on we got to medicalize you. We got to put you on hormones." Like there was no intensive, conversation about previous trauma history, like your cultural upbringing, any belief systems that might be um, contributing to what your thought process is about medicalization. And so 2 weeks after that, I go back to Planned Parenthood and they prescribe me the medication. And so I go to CVS afterwards and I plop these estradiol and testosterone blocker into my mouth, and I feel like I'm so joyful and high for like the first hour or so. It was so odd to experience this physical high. I hadn't felt
Wow.
so much joy in such a long time
Yeah.
because I was in a constant state of suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, that having this high of, oh my gosh, life is worth living again. That was what was arriving and arising within my body. And I
And
think it
that's
was all,
totally like a panacea effect. Those drugs take a while to kick in. Like this
oh,
is just
wow. So it must have been a huge placebo effect.
yeah, placebo. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. So I'm like, after I took the drug, I go up to my parents, and mind you, obviously our relationship, I don't joke or laugh or anything with my parents. I'm going up to them being like, "Holy cow, like these drugs are working. Oh my gosh, I feel so good." I'm like, I feel like a whole different person. This animated personality came back from when I was
Hmm.
a childhood. And so they were like, well, they didn't know how to. respond or react to my experience being on those drugs. And so over time, I was coming out of my shell more. I was re-socializing and putting myself forth in classes, like having more discussions and leading conversations. And previous to taking drugs, I was just mute, not talking. And whereas the drugs sort of allowed me to explore, re-socialize in a way
Hmm.
that I didn't know was possible. And so I think that was one positive aspect of taking the drugs, that it allowed me to open myself up more, to connect with people more and find the importance of that. And my parents obviously saw the huge difference between being off and on the drugs. And they were like, yeah, this must be the right choice for Nicholas because he's clearly feels like a better person. He's growing. And my grandma even
So,
said that. Oh, go ahead.
so you're doing testosterone blockers and then estrogen as well on top of
Hmm.
that. There's, there's no, the drug is acting as a permission slip for you to be yourself.
Right.
There's nothing in the drug itself that would cause that behavior.
Right.
Testosterone blocking your testosterone like, decreases libido and maybe could make you less edgy and energetic, and then estrogen probably I know it does have a psychological effect of for men can open up their wavelength of emotions, make them more emotional, but I've never heard anybody like take those two drugs and like all of a sudden become a social butterfly.
That's, I guess it was like you said, a permission. I mean, obviously it was a permission slip, but um, I also am very sensitive to medication and any drugs
Hmm.
or anything
Okay.
like that. So I think
Yeah,
maybe
maybe.
that had a contributing effect too as well. I mean, if I drink alcohol, if I even drink
Yeah.
caffeine or decaf, I'm like sick for 3 days because I'm
Okay.
shaking. And
Okay.
so
Huh.
I think the drugs were obviously messing with my endocrine system. And so, um, alongside it feeling like a permission slip to express my femininity in more free form, I was obviously expressing those feminine traits of more social, being social, because obviously, like when you're a woman, women tend to speak more, right? Like that's sort of the stereotypes. Like the men's more like the silent, and the women's more conversational. That's sort
Yeah.
of like the stereotype.
Yeah.
And
Your
so,
mileage may vary, but yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
yes. And so it was interesting that, the family members were affirming from seeing my behavior
Okay.
change over time. I
You
mean,
said
I
your grandma
was,
before I interrupted you. Was she living with you guys at that time? Was she in
no,
close
whenever we
contact or?
go visit, I was very to myself. We My grandparents live in a cottage on a lake, and it was a two-story house, and I would always go up in the room that my family and I were staying, and I would just coop up in there and never really come out. While before I was trans identified, but as soon as I was taking the drugs, I guess like you said, it was a permission slip to re-socialize. And my grandma was like, wow, he's not really up there anymore. My grandpa, who doesn't ever really talk, was actually like, he's very different now,
Hmm.
So they saw the difference and they were like, well, this must be what he needs to do. This is what's meant for him. And at some point, obviously, there was no conversation about detransition as it is today during while I was trans from age 18, 2018 up until 2022. There was some discourse, but not to the degree it is today. But my parents didn't really have any of the information. So my dad, wanting to be loving and supportive, would just be like, hey, are you going to go on to get breast augmentation? Have you looked into a doctor yet? That sort of thing. And what saved me from actually enacting those appointments was laziness. I hate research. I hate, finding out and discovering what I have to do in order to do that. And so that laziness prevented me from actually, going out and doing those things.
Hmm.
Being an INFP, one of our, least favorite things to do is doing research and gathering research. And so that was my saving grace.
So you were just hormonally
Mhm.
transitioning. What was
Yeah.
the, other than the personality switch or change, what were the physical effects of
Well,
this?
I lost complete sexual drive.
No. Was
Every
that a
time I would,
relief for you?
yeah, because it was constantly sexual. I was constantly sexualizing everything, and it was so great to step away from all that.
Yeah.
The other effects was fat tissue growing in my chest, and it's still here today. It's not really gone away. Um, Obviously, the fat distribution. Um,
Energy
uh,
levels change?
um, During the estrogen, are you
Yeah.
asking?
Especially the
I would
blocking your
say,
testosterone.
I didn't notice a huge difference in energy, but I noticed I was more emotionally um neurotic.
Hmm.
So I would, you know, I thought the suicidal ideation, the anxiety, depression would disappear, but it actually intensified it and made things worse. Previous to this, I didn't have any social anxiety, but it really heightened it to a point where I really didn't want to be around people all that often. And every time I was around people, it was like I was in flight or flight. And talking to people and having conversation was definitely something that was extremely uncomfortable to my body.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think it emotionally heightened me for sure.
Okay. So it's just an interesting switcheroo. So at first it helps you break out of your shell, but then you're like all your nerves are like connected and it's just too much stimulation to be outside of your shell. So you want to go back into your shell
Right.
that you'd already, been comfortable in to one degree or another, I guess, before then.
Yeah, it was definitely that push and pull where there were times where there would be an energy of, oh my gosh, I want to go out and socialize with my friends. But then there also, when I would be in that space, it's like, I don't know how to interact. I don't know how to
Hmm.
connect. I don't know how to be around people because for years I had been avoiding being social. And
Yeah.
so it's that desire of, oh my gosh, being around people, but how do I be around people? And it's definitely been a lot of practicing these last few years, learning how to do that.
Yeah. So you avoided further medical, I guess, commitment to your identity, by sheer dint of laziness. Uh, but what initiated your reconsideration of transition, of trans identity?
What do you mean reconsideration of my trans
When
identity?
did you start to detransition? I was
Oh,
being
okay.
too wordy. Yeah.
Well, it was a gradual process for sure. And what was kind of nice was COVID helped. I would say COVID was kind of the best things that has ever happened to me because it allowed me to during lockdown, while I was in college, we were sent back home. And so when I was living with my parents, all I could do was, either go to class or stare at my phone. And while I was watching TikToks on my phone, I was starting to watch, oh, what is the spiritual stuff? What is this stuff? It was kind
Hmm.
of getting me engaged. It was all about self-help and very new agey stuff.
But
And
a different expansive discussion around meaning of life rather than, I guess, just gender
yeah, it
or,
was a way to get away from gender, I think. Um, what was being revealed to me is by stepping away and receiving new information that wasn't trans, I kind of had to step out of that bubble and I had that opportunity to like really invest more of my time and energy into something that was new, which is self-help and self-development.
hmm.
And the more I got into that, I started reading books like The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Alan Lipton and um, I one of my favorite books is White is the New Black, something like that.
Hmm.
And it was this book about doing a different activity every single day that helped you become more of yourself and loving to discover yourself. And what was awesome was joy was this awesome tool that I had to rediscover and reconnect with my in my body because I was so disconnected from my body that I didn't know that I could create my own emotions. I didn't know how to, that I didn't know I could actively seek out something that could create joy. And so I went on this journey of finding all the different things like skateboarding, jump roping, singing and dancing, all these different things of exploring how I can experience joy in the now. And so even listening to the sounds of the leaves rustling in the woods, like that was one of my favorite things where I would just do and just spend time in nature. And because I was hearing these new agers spend time with nature, be in nature, and I was like, okay, let me do it, see what that's about. Ground in nature, nature's healing. I'm like, I want to heal. I these trans stuff isn't the trans identity isn't working, so I want to do something different. And so the more I started connecting with nature and realizing, oh my gosh, I can change the way I'm thinking and change my belief system. Okay, that's interesting. What does this do with trans? And the more I started to open up that Pandora's box and pulling out what those belief systems were that were limiting from living my best life, because clearly there was social anxiety, clearly there was depression, clearly there was so much pain every single day when I woke up throughout the whole day where my heart felt like there was this extreme
Hmm.
like wrenching a towel type of feeling every single day, and it wasn't disappearing. And I
Hmm.
write this in my graphic novel. It felt like my body was coming, like telling me, like, you gotta feel this feeling. Like, you gotta feel this feeling because you're clearly not accessing your true self. You're suppressing your true self with these drugs. And there were moments where I was like, okay, I'm nature. My body is nature, and I'm taking drugs that are actively rejecting nature, suppressing my natural rhythm of testosterone. That's not right. That's
Hmm.
really against nature, and I want to connect with nature. And so those thoughts led me to, okay, maybe I need to change my drugs. Maybe I need to like not take testosterone blocker and find something natural. And when I asked my endocrinologist if there's anything natural I can take, he was like, no. And so I found this YouTuber saying that if you just inject yourself with the high doses of estrogen, you can suppress your testosterone. I was like, okay, let me try that. And the endocrinologist was like, sure, let's try it. And so I started injecting myself with a needle of estrogen, and that felt like self-harm. It was so hard to just stab my thigh every
Huh.
single time, and that was
Yeah.
also a sign of, okay, if my body's feeling this way, there's something here. And it was a constant process of digging and self-exploring and soaking in new information like astrology and numerology, and really getting into those modalities to really discover myself, because the trans identity is an identity crisis to an extent. And so, really discovering my strengths and my gifts that I bring to the world and my purpose in life, that were all drawing factors to eventually, at some point, I was just having a meditation practice and sitting down and lighting a candle. And I just was connecting with my heart's center and being like, okay, who am I really? Who am I really? Just really being in that rhythm and just seeing what came up and not really attached to an answer. And so after a few days, because I believe in attraction, whatever you're focused on, like things will sort of latch onto or come into your life. And Blair White's video interviewing Shapeshifter came onto my YouTube, and I just was like, what is this detransition stuff? And I started to get down this rabbit hole because luckily my parents were they got infected with COVID, and I was just isolated in my room. So all I was doing was watching detransition videos. And
Hmm.
I was like, this sounds like my stories. This sounds like me, like going through
Hmm.
trauma and having sense of trauma and not really being diagnosed properly with gender dysphoria. And the therapist at the time, I had explored this with her, being like, hey, I don't know that I'm trans. I never got diagnosed. Planned Parenthood just gave me these drugs. And she was mortified. She was like, how is this happening? How were you just given that? And I was like, I'm considering detransition. And she said, well, you should ask yourself, who are you biologically? And that sort of opened up more questions for myself. I remember sitting on this patch of grass outside my parents' house and asking myself, what's been suppressed that needs to be expressed? And the moment I did that, there was this surge of feelings of despair and sadness. And I was writing for like a good 2 hours about the reason, the things that were causing gender dysphoria were these belief systems and feelings, and they weren't actually necessarily like and to me, I believe anything can be healed. I don't think necessarily that you're limited to your mental disease. I think you can heal it. And so, because I had that mindset, I was like, okay, these thoughts and feelings are controlling these behaviors. If they were created, I can create new ones that don't necessarily limit me from living this way.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'm not trans. That sort of was the realization that I'm not my thoughts and my feelings. I'm not these experiences that I had in the past. I'm not the victim. I'm not my bullied experiences. I'm not the pain from the past. That's not me, which is what happens when you identify with your pain. You believe you are the mental illness. You believe that you are a person with person that is gender dysphoria, not someone that has feelings of gender dysphoria. And to me, that's a huge distinction. And so, because I had that relief and realization, I was like, you know what? I can heal this. I can heal this. And I share that with my dad because I was just exploring vulnerability with my dad and I didn't know who else to share it with. Because if I shared it with my liberal friends at the time, they would be freaking out. They'd be like, you're crazy. You shouldn't be doing this. And so I was just like, I
You're
didn't want to.
crazy for wanting to not. Okay.
Yeah, right. It's just an insane thought process. And so I share that with him. He's like, well, it sounds like you know what you're doing. It sounds like you were
Mm,
thinking through this. And he was just being a loving witness. And I really appreciated that he was there for me during that
mm,
time. And I started to have these feelings of excitement that I had before medical transition of, oh my God, like I'm embarking this new journey. But this time it felt like I was coming back to myself. It felt like a homecoming that I could finally not have these drugs. I didn't need to have this external thing to validate me, which were the pills, in order to be myself, in order to love and accept myself. And so it was sort of this
mm.
incredibly relieving thing to realize I don't need these pills to be myself. And I get to really be a biological man and love and accept that. And I think part of what I offer to the world is my femininity. I think the femininity that has been suppressed for so many years is what I meant to, explore and unleash
Hmm.
in a biological male body. And I think the world doesn't, well, the world that I grew up in and the culture I grew up in, that wasn't loved and accepted in a healthy way. And for me to show up and love and accept
Mm.
that part of me unconditionally and walk in the world in that way is more powerful than taking medical to be medicalized in order to do that, if that makes sense.
It's very close to. I spoke with a Thai woman a couple years ago, and in her culture, she immigrated to San Francisco, grew up, and was a lesbian, and had interesting kind of the reverse, like a butch
Hmm.
female, like, and in Thai culture, there are an exception. There is an exception made for the feminine male, and the masculine female, and they kind of phrase it like, you were a man in your past life, and you still have work to
Right.
do on that aspect. But you bringing that up, there's something that you are working through on your own spiritual journey, but there's also something additive to culture. And it's kind of a mystery. And I think that the whole gender conundrum is trying to, put psychological terms or put like a diagnostic criteria on this strange phenomena of the feminine male and the masculine female. They're the exceptions, and they somehow explicate the rule. They somehow show us something about this thing called gender and how it relates to sex. and that there's something going on there, and that there's something you can look through history, especially the history of the arts, and a lot of feminine males have contributed excellence to our culture in a very particular way. That if we just went full, Iran on one way, or full Sharia law in another way, or even, hardcore, we're going to purge the gays kind of conservatism, that misses out on, well, one, it's harming other people for sure, but two, it shows the culture's unease. And I think that the unease is okay. It's okay to be uneasy with these exceptions. I don't think like calling it homophobic to dislike a feminine man is the proper way to do it. Like maybe that person has something to work through, but maybe culture, maybe there's a biological reason why, males don't necessarily trust feminine males, for one reason or another. It's an open dialogue, but I think within our culture, there is room for people of your stature
Yeah.
to develop their gifts and then to contribute to culture, to society, to people, if it's articulated, as you say, in a spirit of service.
Yeah, to me, I find that, if we're talking about femininity as an archetype, right? Which is, to me, femininity is have a lot of it's a connection with about emotions and allowing emotions to be expressed. To me, that's sort of how I start to see femininity in that flow of that. And our culture has a strong hard time allowing feelings to be okay in the body. And you can see that with the trans stuff. It's like
Mm.
when you're not allowing feelings, uncomfortable feelings to be okay in the body, you're going to create disharmony in the body. And
Hmm.
so to me, if we're exploring femininity from a side of allowing emotions to be okay and really embracing that, to me, the culture needs that. Our culture is so masculinized where we shun feelings, make feelings wrong, or grab a new addiction in order to, suppress a feeling, take a
Yeah.
pill to suppress a feeling. Well, that is lacking in femininity, in my opinion, because when you are allowing the femininity to show up and arise, you're saying, okay, feelings are okay to be in the body. Let's just soften into the feelings. Let's see what these feelings can show and express within me, and not let it be controlled and shunned and made wrong, which the
Hmm.
masculine aspect within us can do. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, the feminine aspect, if we're going that far, can let emotions rule. So it's always
right,
about
it's a
balance.
balance.
Yeah.
But I think there's a impulse in because I like listening to occult science. I like listening to Rudolf Steiner type of studies.
Hmm.
And if we're talking about sort of rhythms in, what do you say, like eras or epochs, it's like we're moving into more of a feminine consciousness, if that makes
Hmm.
sense, and rebalancing that because transhumanism is more of like the inverted, extreme way of masculine energy of like technology and ignore the emotions and really be constantly physical and really focusing on the material and not really focusing on the feminine. And so to me, obviously like we don't want extremes, but bringing in that feminine aspect to harmonize with that masculine is the goal in my opinion. I don't
Hmm.
want to say that one is better than the other. We need both.
Yeah. So what's your graphic novel about?
Oh, it's my story. It's about
And what's it called? You have to name drop my
oh
book.
yeah, it's called Trans to Detrans, a Soul Solution. I
Hmm.
mean, I can grab it. It's the
Nice.
cover has a
Wow, this is
rose.
thick.
Yeah, it's like 200 pages of art.
Nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And it's about, the loud homophobic thoughts that were ruling my childhood and going through medical transition and then coming out of it and showing how to come out of it and really offering some awesome thoughts. I like
Hmm.
to drop in the soul solution, meaning throughout the book, there's You can see it with the font and the type of colors I've used to express and explore ideas that are higher and more truthful and more loving versus the dark green, blue colors that sort of refer to the wounds and the painful thoughts that the wounds were living from. So, I have a section dedicated to different parts of my body that I hated and dissociated from.
Mm.
I hated my penis. I hated my leg hair. I hated my voice. And there's a page where um, I'm pressing on my Adam's apple,
Mm.
and it's a hand that goes deep, deep, deep in the cave, pressing like this tiny little image of an apple and saying horrible things to it, right? Like, I hate
Mm.
you. I wish you weren't here. I hate being a man. And
Yeah.
same stuff with the penis. But then there's the other opposite of it being the loving, soulful voice, which is, I see that you're feeling this way. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I see that you're feeling all this pain. I'm here with you. It must have been difficult going through puberty, having those experiences, those thoughts and feelings. But I love you as you are. Look at how awesome this body hair does for us. Look at how awesome the genitals do for us. Look at how awesome things that our voice can produce. We can sing, we can dance, we can just one hum with our voice, we can literally relax the vagus nerve. And so those sort of things and sharing that aspect of
Mm.
um, the two extremes of unconditional love versus the wounds. That's
Yeah.
sort of the theme of showcasing people what true love is, or not true love, self-love is, because I think it's a hard time to grasp what self-love is, and we can conflate it with self-care, which is not the same thing, in my
Or
opinion. And
narcissist
so,
pampering. Yeah.
right, like doing your nails, getting your nails done is not gonna heal you. And so, and so I like to showcase and help people, feel into the different rhythms of what it's like to hear and be in the energy of your wounds versus what it's like to be in the loving, soulful space. And
Mhm.
it's done through illustrations, which I'm a visual person and forever who is, and I think most people are visual, and you can really see and feel into the darkness, but also the light. It's almost like you're being slapped every other page because you're like, ah, it's beautiful. And then you're like slapped in the face with like this dark imagery. I mean, I have a page where it's like this trans identified demon on a throne, and he
Mm.
has this
Satan.
bulge with like
Yeah.
he, she pronoun badges and this crown. And um, he
Baphomet.
has this chain, and like I'm chained to it, like my neck is chained to it, and there's like fire everywhere.
Hmm.
And there's imagery of beautiful stuff like being like my face on a flower, or guiding people through a meditation, things like that. So
Hmm.
it's a mixture of the light and the dark, for sure.
So that's kind of a personal question. I don't mean to overstep my bounds, so
You're
pardon me
allowed.
or ignore this, but romance-wise, it doesn't seem like you've had much success. At this point in time, is there like a peace with the celibacy at this point, or an openness with the possibility, or
Well, so for a long time, the wound was ruling my life of I want to be loved by men.
yeah.
And right now, I'm like, I don't want anything to do with men. Like, I'm sort of in
Okay.
this season of
Well,
like,
thanks for joining me in the midst of your fury.
well, it's not like an angry thing. It's more like I'm open to dating, but there's this feeling of like, don't touch me, right? Like, just don't touch me there. Don't touch me anywhere. I
Yeah.
just love being in my own energy. I love being in my own space. I love the life I'm creating.
Hmm.
I'm embarking on this new journey of going to massage school, and that's going to take up a lot of space in my energy. And so
Yeah.
that to me doesn't feel like it's the right time. And there's
Hmm.
people that come into this world and their purpose is to learn through relationship and have, these loving relationships. I don't think that's in the stars for me, at least not right now. I mean, it's not been like that for my whole entire life, where
Hmm.
like a romantic relationship isn't for me. I mean, I don't know if you ever interviewed Leighton Elias? She's
Perhaps.
a she's a detransitioner.
Yeah.
Um, And I mean, if you listen to her story, she's a lesbian, and she and her wife literally escaped a cult together. And she it's obviously like her purpose was to like learn true love and have true love with her. For me, it's like
Mm.
I'm kind of like where Laura is, where it's like we had a lot of difficult experiences with men, and we haven't really had that true love, fallen in love with
Yeah.
men yet.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you have any men that are looking
You're
for
open to
another
it.
man,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, like
We can do a little bit of
if you have
conversation
anybody,
hookup
just
culture or dating culture rather, not hookup cultures. Don't hook up with
yeah,
people or my guests, but you can date them.
yeah.
Speaking of somebody who married one of my guests, so commit. Um, I since you're a little woo, with the astrology and stuff like that, I'm going to venture a little woo-ness from
Wait,
my
so
own.
before you do that, how would you describe your spirituality? Do you belong to a certain like religion or anything like that?
I am culturally Christian, which isn't so much a cop out for me as a recognition that Christianity is deeply embedded in my blood, in my culture, and in how I relate to the universe and to God.
Mm,
My dad's a pastor, so I have a lot of I haven't been baptized into Catholicism or Orthodoxy, but I've been baptized, so I'm of that faith. I have a spiritual practice that is non-denominational, non-dogmatic, that transcends the aspect of religion that's absolutely essential of, church and liturgy and theology and philosophy and stuff like that. But there's a bonus spiritual practice that is just a direct receiving of the divine, the vibration, the life force. But so I'm open, but I'm definitely Christian.
gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
But I wanted to say that it could be the case that on some level, an aspect that I would never say whether or not you're called to be in a relationship with another person, and because relationship is how so much of the human being grows and develops. But it could
for
be the
sure.
case for some gay males or effeminate males that they were given such a strong anima as their companion through life, and that the relationship that is embodied and formed in the heterosexual male and female, where two different people come together and find unity in that difference, is not necessarily what is needed for the male with a very close and very strong feminine energy. It seems like there's there's like an exception to all of the beautiful, wonderful difficulty of a heterosexual relationship that gay men
Sure.
are kind of don't have to go don't have to deal with. And I think that I have room in my heart and in my worldview for God setting that up for a particular purpose that is mysterious and yet beautiful in its own way.
Well, what's interesting when you say that is so true because my roommate, who's my mentor, I mean, she's my spiritual mentor, and then I also have my sister. They're born on the same dates, and
Hmm.
um, there's this thing called cardology, which is a system using
Is that
like
the
the
Kardashians' religion?
no,
Okay,
it's
good.
the the 78 cards, like the four suits
Tarot.
and
Yeah.
no, the hearts, the diamonds, the spades, the clubs.
Yeah.
Did I already say that? Yeah, that like each card has like a specific date associated to it,
Oh, okay.
and there's like a personality with it. And so my sister and my mentor, they both have the same birthday, and they're called the Jack of Hearts. And their whole thing is to learn through like love relationship, romance. And it's so true because my sister, like since she was a little kid, she had a new boyfriend
Hmm.
every single week. And there were times where like there were parts within me that were like, where's mine? I want one
Mm.
too.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
jealousy clearly, but it was not really anything that I've had. And when I do sort of fall into a relationship, either um, it's just not a match, or the person is avoidant. And it's
Hmm.
like I don't want to be with someone that's avoidant. I'm better than that. I deserve better than that. Because
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know if you how many other people in the audience have, been stood up 5 times in a row by the same guy, but it's just like at one point you're just like, you've done that too many times, and I
Yeah.
just deserve better.
Yeah. So, what's on the docket for you now? What's coming up for you? Looking at your immediate future, what do you got planned? I guess you
Yeah,
said massage school, but
so I have another children's book coming out within the next few weeks or so. And it's one of these, it's the third book to this children's book series.
hmm.
And it's called Gina the Javelina Gets Caught, Feels Fickle in a Pickle. And it's basically about, a javelina in the desert, which is where I live. And she's this rambunctious girl that is, causing disruption and kind of is a nuisance, but
Hmm.
learns and shows people what forgiveness is all about.
Hmm.
And that's sort of what I'm working on. I have like the cover and one more page that I need to draw, and then it's off to Amazon. Those two books are available on Amazon. And the other thing I'm working on is a workbook for ROGD parents. I coach
Hmm.
parents and also kids as well. That
Hmm.
I follow I've created this, not protocol, but like curriculum of calling it the 4 pillars of divine parenting. The first one is um, authenticity mapping. Like I've already spoken throughout this whole thing, is using astrology, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, and human design and other personality systems to really dive deep into how awesome the parent is. And the second one is understanding and having the spiritual foundation of um, calling it what is ego, the ego within, the wounds within, and what behaviors are controlling you and also your child, and how your child got to where they are today, and finding out and having understanding about how your child got to where they are today, so that we can understand how we can get to a better and healthier place for your child, and so that you don't react from a place of your wounds in your parenting. And the third one is um, what was the third pillar? I can't remember. But there's two other pillars that really dive deeply into, really understanding and helping parents understand how to shift your vibe. Because when you learn to love and accept and heal the wounds within you, those wounds no longer have power over you. And if you're allowing your wounds to parent your child, then that
Hmm.
child's going to learn those behaviors and basically continue this cycle of living from their wounds. And so parents need to take their power back by learning to be their number one influencer. By
Hmm.
once they learn how to love and accept the wounds within themselves, then they can offer the same thing to their child instead of reacting. And
Yeah.
so, like, let's say the child is angry, and instead of matching that with anger, you're just like, I see that you're angry, or if the child's feeling shame, I see that you're feeling shame, like acknowledging the feeling and seeking understanding, and then following it with love and truth. And those things are things I share in my coaching protocol, so that parents are equipped to become, I call, the divine parent.
Hmm. Amazing. And where can people find that resource or connect with you for that?
They can either email me or find me on Instagram. They can just DM me. My email is, well, it'll be on the Instagram, or they can DM
Yeah,
me.
I'll
Yeah.
link it in the description. And so one more question. You said you changed your name from Bloom to Flower. Is that true?
Yeah.
But
So
how do you do that after publishing books?
you just, go back and change it. That's what I did yesterday. Was
Okay.
I spent a whole day just re-editing the books and then
Okay.
re-uploading
All right.
to,
Good. Good.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I just was getting tired of Blooms, which is like a pseudonym I created because I didn't want employers to find out about the stuff I do, talking about the trans stuff. And now I'm
Mhm.
like, I don't care. Like my bosses are voted both for Trump. I work at an art gallery, and they're both like talking about make America great again. I'm like, what was I so afraid about? So
Wow. How the
yeah.
political landscape has changed and shifted. That's pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean, they are like one of my bosses is 70, the other lady is in her 80s, and they're both like, yeah, putting on their Make America Great Again hats, and it's just such a delight being around them.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
Nicholas, so is your the name given to you, your Christian name is Flower then? No,
Yes,
not your Christian, but
flowers.
your surname is Flowers. Okay.
Hmm.
And that's from
Yeah.
your father?
That's from my father, yeah. So
Is there a particular flower or is just the whole field, just all
it's
of
the
them?
full field. It's the
Wow.
whole field, yeah. It's a whole mountain full of flowers.
What a name. What a lineage. That's amazing.
I don't know,
I
it's just
I
crazy.
think that I mean it's been wonderful hearing your story. I'm keen on hearing in the future your development and maybe I'm a stickler. Maybe it's my online racist throwing showing through or something.
I love
But
that.
I do think that there's you are a meeting of these two cultures on a genetic level.
Mm,
Like there's a dialogue between your Japanese and your American, your Caucasian going on. I'm
right.
wondering how that is going to flower and as you mature and how you are the quite literally a crossroads, quite literally a
Rich.
multi-ethnos, a bridge and a combination, an alloy. And that's got to be a strange, fascinating, and wonderful
It
experience. And I'm
is.
looking forward to how you develop as a person, ethnicity aside, but that's just an aspect of what makes you different and unique and, poised for, probably there's some, not necessarily weaknesses, but maybe some temptations or struggles that come with that, but also powers,
Mm,
just with your particular mix of being. So,
yeah. I'm excited for that too. I mean, it'd be really cool to be able to translate my graphic novel or use children's book
oh,
into Japanese, but the Japanese don't really work with figurative language the way that we do. So it's
oh,
just
really?
as I started to translate it and I was showing my Japanese friend, she was like, none of this makes sense if a Japanese person is
Oh,
reading it, because all my stuff that I've written is all metaphors. Not all of it,
yeah,
but a lot of it is. And
yeah,
they're very literalist. Language. And so there's a time and place for poetry and not when it comes
yeah.
to um, memoirs or stuff like that.
Stories or yeah, interesting. That is
So
another interesting thing to solve if your energies are directed in that way.
yeah, maybe one day I might try that. I tried
Yes.
it for a little bit, but it felt really difficult just
Yeah,
because um, translation is not my strong suit. That's for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Well, you are a translator in other ways, and
There you go.
God bless you. And I'm glad that your authenticity and your laziness too barred you from harming yourself too
Yeah.
much with the transition stuff. So
Yeah, definitely. It's great to have detransitioner friends like Laura, because I mean, she lives 30
Becker, yeah,
minutes from me. Yeah.
yeah,
And we just talk about this stuff all the time. We talk about how we can coach parents and stuff like that. So it just feels
yeah,
like, a kindred soul and we get
yeah.
to explore fun, cool things.
Fun. Well, it was great meeting you. Thank you very much for your time and all your work. I'm going to link it down in the description so people can connect with you and share your books with, or, do something sneaky, put that on the Pride shelf at their local grade school and, share a different point of view that's a little bit more grounded in humanity and nature. So God bless, Nicholas. Thank you.
Thank you so much.